Because like a financial advisor, a brokerage platform, a fund manager, a newspaper, they're not interested in teaching you how to do this, right? Because they're not going to make any money out of it. So it's only people like me who don't have a vested interest in hiding this from you that can just show you guys, this is the cheapest, simplest way to manage your money by yourself. You absolutely can do this by yourself. And that frees you up from scams, from getting ripped off by financial advisors and banks, from loads of stress. You can totally do this. It's dead simple.
To be is to do. To do is to be. Welcome to DoBeDuu. Life is an ever-evolving process of doing and becoming and doing through learning, growing, and discovering the magic of you. So here's to the ones who live on their terms, do what they feel what they do, and challenge themselves to DoBeDuu away in harmony as they play the game of life. Welcome to the fourth episode of DoBeDuu with Steve Cronin, the man, the myth, the money maestro. His objective in life is to get people to financial freedom through advising them on savings and investments. And today we're going to have a grand talk with him about how we can get you to financial freedom in 10 steps. And Steve's the founder of Debt Simple Saving, formed in 2016. He's based in Dubai, and he's been on, I guess, all the possible media channels I've seen so far. So I'm really privileged to have him on the show, and it's just going to be a great conversation. Thank you for coming aboard, Steve. Great to have you.
My pleasure. Really happy to be here today, Vic.
Thanks. Okay, so I think what we're going to do is basically just get a bit of intro from you, background, build credibility. You know, people love credibility out here. So we're going to just get a background from you, and then probably move on to your 10 steps of financial freedom and how do you see it works for people, not only in the UAE necessarily. I think it's more about mindset, is what you told me. So how you can get people to achieve financial freedom in their lives based on what they want.
Sure. So I suppose that the first question is like, why do I talk about money all day, and why am I so passionate helping expats to? And when I say expats, obviously I include actually UAE nationals or nationals of any GCC Middle East region. But I think in particular expats really struggle with their finances, and they may just be spending too much money. And that's possibly because they're away from their family, and therefore there's a bit of a hole in their heart. And so they try and fill that with spending to distract them from that. We all work hard in this country. And so, the other thing is there are a lot of distractions, right? There are a lot of malls, there are a lot of things to spend on. And you see that someone's always got a better car than you, got a better villa than you, got nicer clothes than you. So if you're not careful, the temptation to spend more money is huge.
Inevitable. Then
related to that is it's very easy to get into debt. There's always banks phoning you up for new credit cards. And I write on the debt panel for the national newspaper, which I think is a great newspaper, by the way. It's one of the very few newspapers that actually like fighting the fight against scammy financial products in the UAE. And every single week, we get heart-rending stories from people who have built up too much debt and then lost their job, or their dad's got sick and doesn't have healthcare or something like that. And they have these terrible debt problems, and they're like, what do I do about it? And actually, it's quite difficult to get out of that situation. You might no longer be arrested for it, but it's still going to ruin your life and be stressful as hell. So people find themselves getting stuck in debt. Even if you don't find yourself stuck in debt, even if you are saving lots of money, you could then find yourself trapped by some scammy, commission-driven financial advisor, of which there are many, 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 and end up in a long-term savings plan or in whole life insurance. And these plans, which have been completely banned in developed countries like the UK, US, Australia, South Africa, etc., they were rife in these countries in the 80s and 90s, and then they got banned, and all the advisors moved to places like Hong Kong, Dubai, Singapore, and started selling them to expats like us. And so while the regulations have tightened up a little bit, it's still been an absolute bonanza for these advisors. And so I reckon about 50% of people who earn 15,000, 20,000 dirhams and above are stuck in one of these savings plans. And when you try and get out of them, they'll be like, oh, but this is a 25-year plan. So if you want to get out, we'll take 80% of your money. Just disgusting stuff like that. So I have people write into me every week with tales of them losing $10,000, $100,000, more than $100,000. It's really painful. And then even if you've avoided a long-term savings plan, if you just want to invest in a really sensible way through Vanguard or iShares or one of the other big fund managers, it's incredibly difficult as an expat, because if you phone up Vanguard and say, hey, I'd like to invest in your products, they'll just say no, because they're not interested in servicing expats, right? It's too complicated for them to deal with people in the UAE. They're only just getting to grips with dealing with people in the UK, for example, or Australia. So we're like way down the list. And so people hit this massive brick wall, and it's very hard to then discover how to actually invest properly, sensibly for your retirement. So there's all these barriers that stop people managing their money properly. And I really know that if you take the time to figure out how to do it, you can transform your life, right? And you can have a sense of direction. You can reduce the stress of dealing with money, because it's not the money that kills you, right? It's that, or lack of money. It's the stress around the lack of money that's going to kill you, right? And so if you have a sense of direction, then you can really, really reduce that stress. Even if you lose your job and get kicked way off track, you know where you need to get to, and then you can probably retire, or don't really like that word, you can reach financial independence where you don't need a boss far, far earlier. And we're talking 5, 10, 15 years earlier than you ever thought possible, and go and do something that has a real impact on the world. So that's why I'm really passionate about this. And as you can tell, I can talk about this all day.
I realize you told me, I think you speak about it on weekend courses that you do for 14, 15 hours.
Yeah, so literally I used to run weekend workshops, and it was about 6-7 hours a day. And by the end of the Saturday, I couldn't speak anymore, because I just worn out my voice. But what used to amaze me is that we would get to 6 p.m. on a Saturday, and nearly everybody would still be, I would say, like, are there any questions? You know, I'd stay on the line until like every single question was answered, and people would just stay behind, whether it was on Zoom or in real life. And people would just stay behind until the end, until every question was answered, because they're just so hungry for this knowledge. Amazing. So it was really wonderful. And what I've done now is shift those workshops to an online course. So you can watch me in like little videos, so that I don't have to say the same thing again and again, and don't have to talk for 15 hours and blow my voice out. So you can watch all the different videos, all the different topics. And then once that's covered, then you can hop into the Facebook group with me, or we have a Q&A session on Zoom every week. And then you can ask the questions. So it's a nice balance of not having to listen to me talk for 15 hours, plus still getting some live interaction. You
can do it at your own pace, at your own time and leisure, whenever you'd like to listen to parts and bits and go back and recap and get those nudges that you missed out as well, which is great.
Exactly. Yeah.
For the listeners, I didn't mention, but the reason why we love Steve, we really wanted him on board, was basically because he doesn't want your money. He just wants to educate you and empower you to do it yourself, I guess. That's I think the biggest difference between having a financial advisor on the podcast and having you, because you're not interested in getting people's money. You just want to educate them and empower them, which is great, I think. And I think it's such a important point. Thank you. And yeah, we should really have started this actually. Like if I do like corporate workshops or whatever, or in fact any kind of talk, I have to start with like, why should you listen to me? And actually, what I like to start with to get people's attention, I put my suit on and my tie and everything like that, and then I say, right, what's the first rule
of expat saving and investing, and people are like, oh, stay in the market for a long time. And I'm like, no, never take financial advice from someone wearing a suit. And then I like take my, I don't take everything off, obviously, because it's, but I take my jacket and tie off, and I say, look, and actually, I really believe this. Like, you really should not trust anyone wearing a suit, because they are working for some big company whose job it is to extract money and fees from you. You know, and if we look at these savings plans, I mean, people get $5,000, $10,000 commission like right up front. You know, until about mid-October, when the regulations changed, you would get, like, the moment that your victim, right? The moment your victim signed on the dotted line, you're like, cha-ching, and you get $5,000, $10,000. And so, of course, these guys will literally sell their grandmother to get you to sign up to one of these plans. And I mean, it's really disgusting. And so they spread like this virus. I mean, before there was coronavirus, there was long-term savings plans, right? And they just spread like a virus. And what I like to do is vaccinate people and teach them how to repel these financial advisors, and then that really protects people. So yeah, the how I differentiate myself is that I do not take any money from financial companies, like, whatsoever. I have no affiliation with any of them, so that I can tell people what works and what doesn't work. And that's super, super important for me. Like, if people ever pay me, they pay me for my time, but I'm never taking like kickbacks
from anyone.
From yeah, it's so important. It's important because the moment you take commission from someone, your mentality changes.
Yeah, I can
it
imagine.
Really does. Like, you start thinking, well, how can I maximize my commission? It's a really dangerous thing. And so, because I have no commission, I just literally tell people, like, I think this company's good. If you don't like that, you go with this company, and it doesn't really matter from my perspective.
I think that makes so much sense, because I think most people end up trying to get incentives, kickbacks from other agencies, and I think involuntarily or unwillingly, even start tending to shift that way and start recommending those companies whether they like to or not, and eventually, before they know it, they're in the rat race as well.
And we had a really interesting situation with UAE Exchange as well, where they were actually, you know, really, really good company for sending your money overseas. So if you wanted to invest using a US brokerage company, you could send your money to the US, and they had the best rate for dirhams to dollars, like, in town, like literally the best rate, and really good service. But obviously they got tied up in the whole BR Shetty scandal, NMC and everything. And they started holding on to people's money for 2 weeks. I'm like, it doesn't take 2 weeks to do a transfer. They're probably using the money as liquidity, right? Which is pretty scary.
Yeah.
And that all kind of collapsed, and the central bank had to step in. And at one point, you know, I've been so impressed by them, I thought, well, maybe I should let them sponsor my workshops. But I decided, like, no, you know, I should really be completely objective. And what I found myself doing at one point is I had to send an email to my entire mailing list saying, do not use UAE Exchange, because they're having all these problems. And so I had to, like, do a real U-turn from being like, this company's great, they'll sort out all your transfer needs, to do not use them. And I think if they'd been sponsoring me, it would have been much harder for me to do that. So that was a real lesson for me as well. It's like, thank goodness that I hadn't had any kind of affiliate relationship with them, because, like, sometimes companies stop being the best, and you need very rapidly to just, you know, cut that allegiance. Unfortunately,
but you have that freedom because you're not affiliated to anyone, right?
Exactly. And so that it's just a huge load off my mind, in that I can just literally speak the truth in my eyes. I just say what I think. So, you know, I'm not really a salesperson. I'm not having to think, oh, how do I convince this person to buy this financial product, because I don't have any financial products to sell. And so that makes me, you know, pretty happy, actually. That's why I really enjoy my business. Just get to talk.
So basically, you advocate people to start managing your own finances in the bigger picture. I mean, their daily finances as well as their investments by themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the worst mistakes people make is that they outsource their financial life either to their other half or to a financial advisor. And sometimes that's a pull, like a financial advisor will come in and say, hey, you need to do this. And you're like, oh, okay, because you don't know any better, or because you're busy, or because you lack confidence, right? You lack confidence with numbers or with maths or with investing. And so you're like, I'll leave this to my husband or wife, or I'll leave it to my financial advisor. And the problem is that you find out 5, 10 years later that advisor or your other half is not as good at investing as you hope they might be, and it's a bloody mess. So I always say to people, like, if you're in a relationship and you've merged your finances, for the long term, then there are two of you on the investment committee in your family, and you better claim your seat on that investment committee, because we all know people. You must know people who trade Bitcoin, Tesla stocks, whatever. What happens is that when they've done really well, like, it's typically guys, I've got to say, like, mostly guys, like, they'll go to their wife and be like, hey honey, look, I just made $5,000 on this trade, aren't I clever? And then the weeks where, like, they're down $10,000, they just don't. They're like, oh no,
Hey, honey, I'm not coming home tonight. I got a
yeah, they
friend
don't
like
say
that.
anything to the wife, and so the wife gets this completely misleading impression that their husband is some trading guru when actually he's just hiding the losses, and this can be really disruptive. So that's why I say, like, you have to, and I've said this to some of my private clients as well. I said, like, if you're going to do this trading, you need to show your wife the good results and the bad results every Thursday. At 7 p.m., you're like, here are the results for the week. And I don't care whether you're going to be embarrassed or not, like, you have to show them.
Say it as it is.
And I think that makes a massive difference. Yeah.
Yeah, I think transparency, anyways, that's a family thing. I think you've got to be very clear about with anything and anyone, especially with yourself. Okay, so should we move on to the 10 steps of financial freedom and how we could get everyone to that, leading to financial freedom?
Sure.
So,
Sure.
Okay, do you want to mention the 10 steps, the first 5 steps? How do you want to go about it, ideally?
Yeah. So what I've done is I've created a process. How this works is that I used to be a management consultant, and which basically involves simplifying processes, making things understandable for people, and I realized that there was such a lack of clarity around how to invest as an expat or how to manage your money that really people just needed something simple and straightforward. There was just a clear plan. And so I created this process, and how I did it was just by talking to hundreds of people. Like, literally, when I first started out doing this, I'd spent many years advising banks and sovereign wealth funds that look after the wealth of a nation. So, you look at places like Saudi, like $220 or so billion, Libya, like $65 billion. But I needed to start talking to individual people if I was going to help individuals. And so to start with, I'd say, look, you buy me lunch or buy me a cup of tea, and I'll help you with this. And so that's how I got to speak to so many people. And I created this process. While there are 10 steps, I kind of boiled it down to 3 stages.
Okay.
And those 3 stages are plan, save, and invest. So you've got to figure out what it is that you want in life, and then you've got to figure out how you're going to save that money to achieve that, and then you've got to figure out what you're going to invest and how. So those are the 3 main steps. So many people come to me wanting to skip to the end, and they're just like, how do I invest? Tell me how to invest. And I have to be like, well, wait a second. That's like step 8, right? There's a whole lot of steps in between that we have to get to first.
Okay. So we're going to cover all 3 steps in the conversation, right? So what do we start with? We start with saving.
So we're going to start with planning.
Okay.
That's what comes first. And with planning, I feel like it's very easy as an expat for you to not really have a sense of clear sense of direction, right? We don't pay much tax. The sun is always shining. and you just kind of get buffeted around by the demands of your family and work and friends and whatever. And then you wake up and suddenly you've been in Dubai for 10 years or whatever. And you're like, oh, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? And so I really, really strongly believe that having intention in your life is super important. Like you have to have a clear direction in your life, right? And before, if you don't have clear direction in your life, then you can't have clear direction for your money. And so what's going to happen is that you will think, well, I've got a good salary, so I just don't mind spending, and I don't like to measure how much I spend, and so I'm just going to kind of like get on with things. And you find that you spend much more than you would otherwise if you actually track it properly. It's kind of easy come, easy go. Whereas if something really bad happened to you, let's say a parent passes away or a child gets cancer or something, if you have a mission, you'd be like, wow, I was put on this earth to raise money for children's cancer hospitals. And you would make sure that every dollar that you earn and every hour of your day is used really efficiently because you have this burning mission. And so few of us have this burning mission that everything gets really saggy and flabby, and money is like draining out and our time is draining out and we're not using it properly. So the very first thing is like, have a clear intention in your life. Like where do you have intention? Is it in earning money? Is it in spending time with your family? Is it with your hobbies, your friends? Like figure out where you have intention, where you don't have intention, and like give yourself a mission, like whether it's for your life or for the next 5 years or for the next year. I don't really care. I think pilots at the moment, like so many pilots losing their job and cabin crew, and particularly for pilots, like that is a vocation, like their life's mission is to fly planes. And suddenly they're being told, well, there's no planes to fly anymore. And so a lot of them are like, what on earth am I going to do? And this may be the catalyst for them to go and do something different. Now, maybe some of them might end up flying planes over the Serengeti, counting elephants for almost no money or for free because they have enough money saved up and they can still do that. Or they take a little mini retirement, they take a year off, right? Yeah. Others of them, this might be a catalyst that they end up being meditation teachers or something like just something completely different. And this terrible situation suddenly gave them a chance to change their life. But at least like have that clarity of direction, because when you have that, then the clarity that you have for your money is that actually, no, I want to reach financial independence, because once I'm financially independent, I'm going to do X, Y, Z for the benefit of myself and my family, but also for the benefit of the greater world. And so, what is financial independence? This isn't taught in schools, right? So no one really thinks this. Once your passive income, the money that's coming in from, not from your salary. So it might be rental income from properties that you rent out. It might be dividends from stocks and bond funds that you own. It might be side hustles that you've set. You might own a wooden sunglasses store on Instagram that just kind of like ticks along and brings in money for you without you having to do much effort. You might have an online course or something like that. You might have a podcast. This is relatively passive income where you don't need a boss to earn money. And once that income is greater than your living expenses, like either now or in the future, then you don't need a salary anymore. And you can really calculate pretty accurately how much you need to sort of grow your stock and bond portfolio, for example, so that you can generate enough money to cover your living expenses. And once you do that, you do not need to work anymore. So when people think about retirement, they think like, oh, I need this huge amount of money. I need like $1 million, $2 million, maybe more to provide for my family. And so you have this kind of existential stress of like, how am I going to get to this impossibly big figure? Or how am I going to get to having 10 houses that I own so that I can generate enough rental income? Whereas if you actually take the time to calculate, and this is what I do, is like show people how to calculate the amount they need saved up so that they will be financially independent, then firstly, you have a concrete goal, so you're more likely to get there. Secondly, you'll find that you get there much faster because you're motivated to get there. And then thirdly, you'll probably reach it you'll reach it far earlier than you ever thought possible, and therefore you can retire. You retire, not just sit on the beach all day, but go and do whatever you want to do in your life.
Ideally, yeah.
Yeah, you can go and do whatever you want to do, and finally you'll have much less stress because you know what your path is. You know what your financial path is. You know, if I invest X amount per month, then I will be able to stop work in 10 years' time. And then if you lose your job, you're like, okay, well, maybe it's going to be 12 years' time now, but at least you have that sense of direction. This massively reduces your strength, your stress. So to summarize, this is like step one is like understanding the mindset around financial independence and money and having a clear sense of direction. So when it comes to the mindset sort of thing, we all have that spending monkey that's saying like you gotta buy that pair of shoes, buy that Apple phone that you don't necessarily need, and you have to have that discipline to control it. And you have to understand that we have all, money is very intangible, it's very psychological, it's like health and relationships. You have to understand what you have inherited, the weird beliefs that you've inherited from your parents, from your culture, from the people around you, from your first boss. And you have to say, well, are these beliefs in money, are they serving me, or do I need to change them? So once financial independence will show you where you've got to get to. And then you have to figure out where you are now in terms of, and so few people do this, actually track your net worth, right? Your assets, what you own minus your liabilities. Like, where are you now? If you need to get to $1 million or $500,000 or whatever it might be, and you've got $50,000, well, at least you know now where you are, where you need to get to, and then we just have to figure out how to get there. And you have to sort out your mindset so that you're like, okay, actually, I forget my past, forget my bad relationships with money or whatever, thinking that I can't handle money or money's never going to come to me. Just let's focus on achieving my goal of getting to $500,000 or $1 million or whatever it is, and create that discipline and that self-confidence in money of knowing how to get there. So that's really the first step around planning, or the first stage of knowing the journey and making sure that you're mentally prepared for the journey. And I suppose, look, I mean, I don't want to dig around in your head, Vic, but it would be interesting to see your parents' relationship with money, and perhaps even your culture's relationship with money. How has that shaped your own relationship with money, and have you changed in your attitude to money over time? Perhaps at some point you're a bit of a salary man, and then not. How's that changed?
Well, actually, quite a bit. I mean, it's good you put the question towards me right now, but I can definitely share. So initially, when you were speaking in the beginning about how expats and having debts and loans and these crises and how it burdens you over time, and I completely, when you were saying those things, I was completely looking back at my mom, because my mom brought me and my brother up, so she was a single parent, and how she was always in debt, especially bringing two of us up, but with school and managing the house, rents and everything. And I remember, credit cards after credit cards and credit cards, and she was always in debt. And I remember getting calls from those, from the phone banking and stuff like that, about paying the minimum, or paying the credit card debt every month and so on. So that stuck. I mean, I'm completely debt free since maybe over 10, 12 years right now. So I stopped. In my life, I never had any credit cards now. So when I started working, I stopped having credit cards at all. And coming back to myself, I think I was salaried for around 10 years, and I didn't think about saving a penny. I had a good income coming in every month, and I was out and about every day doing what I want. I never thought about saving. I was never a person who thought about, I lived very much in the moment, so I never thought about saving anything. And I think down the line you realize financial freedom is, you got to give up the instant gratification for something bigger down the line. I think that's where the monkey mind comes in. You live now, you want it now, that's all that matters. Tomorrow's another day, that's good. But I think when you want to live your life on your terms, you've got to factor in financial freedom. And to me, that's why it's really important to get this word out there about how people can achieve financial freedom and manage to pave their own way forward, because you live once and you really want to do what you want to do with your life, not just get suckered into the whole rat race and the rigmarole, and before you know it, you're in financial debt, going around the whole, get a job, get a house, get married, have kids, and you can't afford half the things, but you get loans because it's very easy to. So yeah, right now I'm more conscious about uh, how I spend my money, which is traveling all the time. But I'm more happy doing that than buying anything. I don't buy clothes. I don't buy any of that because I don't need most of it. It wouldn't change my life if I had a lot of material things or not. But I love traveling, so I spend all my money on traveling.
Well, traveling is great because you can, I always say, like, when you spend something, you should figure out how much value it's bringing to you.
Oh yeah.
And traveling is a great example of this because you can enjoy planning your travel, and then you can enjoy experiencing your travel, and then you can enjoy remembering your travel. So in 30 years time, are you going to be telling your grandkids about your Apple iPhone 12 Pro Max or whatever that you had 30 years ago? Like, no, of course you're not, right?
It's the bullet in my back.
You might tell them, yeah. But if you went to Argentina in 2010, 40 years ago, when you're telling them, like, yeah, of course you could still tell them about that amazing trip that you had to Argentina. And so these life memories are extremely precious, and I think travel is a great way to get value, as long as you do the right kind of travel, because people think they have to go to the 5-star hotels and the resorts and spend lavishly. And of course, these resorts are designed to suck money out of you, let's face it. And they don't give you a real taste of what that country is like either.
At the least, no, true.
Yeah, so you have to do the right kind of travel. Yeah, but then when you do, it can generate enormous amount of value for you as well.
Enriching. I think it's one of the most enriching things in life is delving into people, culture, traditions, languages. To me, that's truly, I think, exactly what you said. It enriches you far more than any material thing can possibly, because it opens your mind, expands your thoughts about what's out there and how perspectives change your life. It's just amazing how people look at life in so many different ways. To me, that's everything. So yeah,
you need to take your podcast out on the road, right?
Yes,
around the world.
I've actually interviewed a lot of people around, like 150 around the globe so far for the past 3 years, but about life and happiness and success. But yeah,
awesome.
Okay, so let's get back to our financial freedom, if you could.
Yes. So we talked about planning, and the next stage is, like, once you have a plan, you're like, okay, I need X thousand so that I can be financially independent, and I've now got this. How am I going to bridge that gap? The first thing is to think, well, how can I save more money? And you've got two levers for this. You can boost your income, which is difficult these days when everyone's getting pay cuts, right? But you can try and find a side hustle. It's never been easier to do a side hustle, right? You can set up an online course on something that you're interested in. You can set up a little store on Instagram or Etsy or whatever. You can do some side job or whatever, or you can try and get promoted. Whatever it is that you can do
online, there are lots of opportunities.
Yeah, there's so many opportunities out there. You just have to think creatively as a family, right? And then secondly, you have to reduce your expenses. And that's about going through, looking at the big items like rent, saying, well, can we reduce that? Can we get our rent down? Or, would we be that much unhappier if we moved to a slightly smaller apartment or a slightly smaller villa and saved 20,000 dirhams? This can make a huge difference. And then the other thing that can make a huge difference is all the little stuff that adds up, right? So all the Deliveroo and Uber Eats deliveries that you're getting, you might be on like 10 a week. And so that really stacks up. And if you can control your spending on that and brunches and all the other little things that like siphon off your money, you can really, really change the amount that you can save. So if you find that you can save $1,000 a month, then you need to challenge yourself and say, well, what would I need to do to save $1,200 or $1,500 or even $2,000 a month? Because it's that regular saving every single month that is going to really transform the size of your investment.
So basically, monitoring your expenses, what you're spending on, trying to cut down on things that you actually don't need to do necessarily. It's just you spend without thinking, just without whether you need it or not. You just want
and let's be honest. I mean, it's not easy, right? This is the boring bit, like going through credit card statements and admitting to yourself. And people rarely have time for this, but it does. Even if you just do it once, right? It makes a massive, massive difference. And people tend to get stuck at this point, like as they go around like the 10 steps, they get stuck at trying to figure out what their expenses are. And so I always say, like, do this, but keep pushing around everything else. You can always come back to this and tighten everything up, because otherwise you'll just grind to a halt at the credit card stage and you'll never make any further progress. The other thing is to make sure that you are not in any kind of expensive debt, or if you are, then you urgently need to get out of this, because I find, like, whether you earn 10,000 dirhams a month or 100,000 dirhams a month, debt is really going to be a millstone around your neck, and it will make money have power over you rather than having power for you, right? We want to have enough cash savings and investments and rental income that we have like this Iron Man suit of money that's going to protect us from like anything that the world can throw at us, whether that's throwing it at the whole world like a coronavirus pandemic, or whether it's throwing it at you when you lose your job. That money Iron Man suit is going to really protect you. But if you're deep in debt, especially credit card debt, the most dangerous thing of all, then money can literally crush you like one of those Terminator machines, out of the movies, just crush your skull into the dust. And so you have to be really, really careful. And generally, I say if the interest rate on your debt is anything over 5%, then forget investing in the stock market. You have to pay this debt down as a priority. And if it's a credit card, it's literally like your hair is on fire, right? It's not like you can do anything else if your hair is on fire. You just have to put it out, right? And this is the same. Like, if you have a credit card balance that you are not paying off every month, you must put all your energy and focus on paying off that credit card, like nothing else. Just focus on that. And that alone will transform your life, at least get you onto some level of dry ground and like rock. Otherwise, you'll be like slowly sinking into the swamp of debt. And it's not easy to get out of it. And it can be like devastating to you and your family.
I feel you. I know people who've gone to credit card debt and they don't realize how it just builds up and builds up, and they don't even realize what happens over 6 months, 1 year. It's not even the money. They probably use 1,000, 2,000 down the line. They've got to pay 10,000 return. It's absurd. I think that should be stopped. Actually, it should be illegal, because it just kills you without people realizing what they've done to themselves. And no one, as you said, no one has that education or knowledge or understanding of what, how they charge you. They charge you on the balance interest. The interest is charged in the balance of outstanding balance. It's crazy.
Yeah. So that you end up with interest on interest, right? And it can add up if you don't pay it off. And you can end up with an interest rate of like 40 to 50%. Like typical credit cards in the UAE will be 40 to 50% a year. But you don't realize this because it says like, 3.25% a month.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you're like, oh, that's okay. But no, it's really, really toxic and super dangerous. So yeah, anyone listening who does not pay their credit card off in full every month, like, you must do that. But then, having said that, at the same time, like, if you don't have a credit card, I really feel like you need to just like put on your adult pants and get one, because debit cards are really susceptible to fraud, and you can have your current account hacked wide open. So many stories of this, of card skimming happens here. You have to be really, really careful. So your debit card is like the keys to the kingdom. You shouldn't let anything except like an ATM have access to your debit card, and everything else.
For sure.
Yeah, everything else,
Absolutely.
credit card, like you're so much more protected. It's much better. So you paid off your debt. Then it's time to start saving. Perhaps the most important thing after paying off your debt is building up a cash buffer of 3 to 6 months total expenses. So
Mm-hmm.
people always say, like, how much do I need in cash? Think of it in terms of months of expenses, right? So
Mm-hmm.
firstly, you need to actually know how much you spend on average a month,
Okay.
um, and then you have to say, okay, I used to say 3 to 6 months. Like right now, because the world is pretty crazy,
Mm-hmm.
I say 6 months. Like you need 6 months cash. And I actually have people. One of the nice things about my job is that I've had people write to me and say, "Hey, Steve, I took your workshop at the start of 2019, and thank goodness I did because I built up a cash buffer. And now that I've lost my job in 2020, I'm actually living on this cash buffer. And if I hadn't had that, I'd be in a real mess."
Okay.
And so that just reaffirms for me how important this cash buffer is. That is what's going to give you resilience, is so that if you lose your job, yeah, of course it sucks, but you have that cash buffer, you will be okay, and you can take your time to find another job, and not just like the first job that comes along,
Because
like
you have
a
no
job
choice. Yeah.
you actually like. And so you have 6 months, and you can probably eke out that money for 9 months as well, and you'll be just fine. So there is nothing more important than a cash buffer. And of course, investing in the stock market is risky, right? So you need all these cash safety nets
Mm-hmm.
so that you can put your money into the stock market. And so that cash buffer is really a huge safety net. The last thing you want to do is put all your money into property or all your money into the stock market, and then you lose your job and you're like, well, I've got nothing to live on, and you have to pull money out of the stock market. But of course, why have you lost your job? Because there's a recession. Well, the stock market's down, and so you made a loss when you're pulling that money out. It's the last thing you want to do. So that cash buffer is really, really important, and you don't have to have it all in the UAE. You can have it offshore, some of it offshore as well, like protected if you want to. And then the other cash buffer that you really have to think about is have you got any big items of expenditure coming up in the next 2 to 5 years? So because let's say you want to buy a house in 5 years' time and you need to build up a house deposit. If you put that, the stock market is very predictable over 30 years, like incredibly predictable, but over 2 to 5 years it's very unpredictable. And so the danger is that after 4.5 years of building up this money in the stock market, you're just getting ready to take it out, and then there's a stock market crashes by say 40% or whatever, and suddenly you've got a much smaller deposit and you can't buy the sort of house that you wanted. So things like weddings, MBAs, cars, property, your kids' university fees, these things, you need to build up that money in cash
Mm-hmm.
over the 2 to 5 years that it will take you to get there. It's no fun, I understand, because savings rates in bank accounts and fixed deposits are really low at the moment.
Mm.
But the main thing is that you have that cash and you don't try and put that in the stock market. And then once you've got that in the stock, once you've got those cash safety nets, then that's when you can put everything else, the stuff that you don't need for 10, 20, 30 years, that's what you can start to put in the stock market. And the crazy thing, Vic, is that you might be able to put 50% of your salary every month
Mm-hmm.
into the stock market. Imagine that. And your mum will be like, what are you doing? This is insane. And you say, no, don't worry, mum, it's okay. Like, because I've got all my cash safety nets, right? I've got my 6 months. I've got my sinking fund for my property and for my wedding or whatever. I've got all that. And now it's just everything else that I don't really need now. That is going to be working really hard for me in
The long
in
term.
the stock market. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Now I want to basically get into investments, more onto investments, but I want to even get an idea. I want to go step by step with those people, basically, of how they get around from what they should plan for exactly. Like you've been a great overall, but for some people, I think I want to actually put step by step, as I've seen you do before very well. So, at least in the planning stage, I, you say I've got, I don't know, 10,000 a month, 15,000 a month. Now, I want to get at that's my goal. I want to save 100,000 a year or 50,000 a year or whatever it is. Now,
Mhm.
and this is my financial goal. How do people how should people plan their financial goals, and what should they do to get to that financial goal?
So when it comes to goals, I think you there's two main drivers of your time. I like to think in terms of time to retirement or time to
Okay.
financial independence. Okay, so that is the point where your passive income is going to be greater than your living expenses. So firstly, you need to figure out what your living expenses are going to be.
Okay.
What are they going to be? Like, what are they now? But what are they going to be when you retire? Like, when you're financially independent? Do you
Considering
need to live
inflation.
on 2,000? Yeah, we can worry about inflation a bit, right? But think in today's money, because it's incredibly hard to think in terms of like
20
20,
years
50
from
money,
now.
right? Yeah. So just think in terms of today's money. It's like, well, at least understand, like, are you going to be happy to live on $2,000 a year, a month, $2,000 a month, or $10,000 a month, or
Hmm.
somewhere, most people somewhere in between that, right? So really try and nail that down, whether it's 4 to 6 thousand or 8 to 10 or 1.5 to 2. Like, where are you going to end up? Because that makes a massive difference. So that's one lever. The other lever is going to be how much you can put in every single month into your investment portfolio. And
Hmm.
with those two levers, that's going to determine your time to retirement. And then you're going to say, okay, well, roughly, let's say I want to live on in retirement, I want to live on, say, $40,000 a year.
Okay.
Well, what you're going to do is you're going to multiply that by 25, and that gives you $1 million. And the act of multiplying by 25 shows you how much you need to grow your portfolio by to live on.
Hmm.
So um, you say, if I have $1 million, I'll be able to take out $40,000 a year to cover my living expenses. If I only have 750,000 and I try and take out 40,000 a year, there's a danger that I burn through it too quickly.
Hmm.
If I have $2 million and I only take out $40,000 a year, then possibly I'm being a bit too strict on myself, a bit too conservative, and I could have a slightly nicer life than I'm actually allowing myself. So that multiplying by 25, that's kind of the sweet spot for this. So the key is to know, like, when you want to retire, like, what do you want to? If you said, look, I'm happy to live on $10,000 a year, right?
Hmm.
Because I'm gonna live in the countryside.
On a hammock.
I'm gonna live in a hut in Goa, and dance to trance music for the rest of my life.
Why not?
Where, like, why not, right? So then I just need $10,000 a year. Then that's fine. Then you only need
In
dollars
savings.
to live on. Yeah, exactly. So already now we've got some stakes in the ground, right?
Hmm.
This gives you control, and then from that you have to say, well, okay, how can I sort out my finances so that I can get to that $1 million? I mean, let's take the more realistic example of someone who's like, they want to spend 40,000 a year, so they need $1 million, which sounds like a lot.
Uh-huh.
How much are you putting in every month? How is that going to get you there? Well, there are various calculators that you can use to calculate this. So you know that if you're going to put in $2,000 every single month, then maybe it's going to take you, let's say, 15 years until you've got that amount of money, 15, 20, whatever years it is. So then that's laid out for you, and that's the sort of planning that you need to do.
Okay. To save money. Now, I think a few things you said about setting money aside every. I mean, you're looking at your expenditure, how much is your necessary spending, how much is just blowing stuff on cash on stuff you don't actually need. Is there a certain amount that you think person should put diligently towards us? Like, what are the best methods that exist out there? Person can actually save their cash every month, which goes out directly. I mean, they know they only have so much left to burn, so it's not just the whole salary comes in; they got all that at their disposal. they put into some fund which forces them to save that much every year. Are there any other methods or mechanisms like those?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I got it. So yeah, there are increasingly these apps and bank accounts that allow you to save a specific amount straight away. So your salary comes in, and then you say, well, okay, of this salary, let's say your salary is, I don't know, 20,000 dirhams. It will take 5,000 dirhams straight out into a separate savings account, and allow you to do that. And I think more and more banks will allow you to do that and create little sub accounts, like little pots that you can put money in. So you're like, okay, every month my salary comes in and I need 7,000 to pay the bill, and then I'm going to save 3,000 for my future property deposit, and then 10,000 goes into my savings account, and then of that I'm going to take out 8,000 and send it to my broker to invest. I think that technology will get more and more common. Otherwise, you just kind of need the discipline, really. You know, maybe you do need a current account and then a savings account, and you say, okay, well, I'm as soon as the money comes in, I am going to take it out and pretend I don't have it, right? You play a trick on your brain, right? If your brain's like, hey, I got 20,000 to spend, it's going to spend it. If you say, actually, no, I'm going to take out 10,000 immediately and pretend that doesn't exist, then your brain's like, hey, I got 10,000 to spend. So yeah, I think that's how you can do it, really.
Okay. I want to get more into investments, but I want to give a quick recap about the 10 different steps that you mentioned to get there, which is firstly the mindset of the individual to basically plan their finances and see where the vision is and where they want to go, followed by, I think it's the saving rate you used to call it, how much you want to save every month.
Yeah, so you have to, if we look at the steps that we covered so far, you need to understand, you need to get your mindset sorted out. That's step one. And then you have to understand where you are right now. So like, what's your net worth? So your assets minus your liabilities. Like, what's your personal balance sheet? What's your personal P&L, income minus expenses? What's all that? Where are you starting with? And then the third step is understanding where you want to get to. So where we talked about, you know, multiplying what you want to figuring out what you want to retire on, multiplying that by 25, and that gets you to the size of your portfolio that you need. So then you have a target. Okay. So that's the planning stage, and then the saving stage. You have to find ways to boost your income and reduce your expenses. You need to reduce any expensive debt that you have, certainly anything with an interest rate over the 5%.
Okay.
Then you need to build up a cash buffer of 6 months expenses. Then you need to figure out what's coming up over the horizon in the next 2 to 5 years that's going to be expensive, that you can't just pay out of your salary, like a house deposit, a wedding, a new car, etc., and start saving money towards that as soon as possible. Once you've got all those steps in place, so that's like steps 1 to 7.
Okay.
Then we can think about what to invest in. Okay. Yeah.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions for Steve or myself, you can leave it in the comments box below. You can visit his website mentioned in the notes section. We'll be back with part 2 on financial freedom next week. Till then, happy Mondays.